Okay, I'm ready to go. All right. I'm having an interview with violinist Sherban Lupu. I'm in Santa Barbara. Sherban is in Bucharest as we chat just now, and we're going to talk about Sherban, your 2022 Toccata Classics release. George Enescu, 1881 to 1955. I want to get those years in because they're very, very important in my view. The years of people, of composers' lives is very important. Anyway, 1881 to 1955, a big span of years that George Enescu observed the world around him. And the CD is called The Unknown Enescu, and it's volume 2 with pianist Viorella Chukul, I'm trying, the Sinfonia da Camera, and conductor Ian Hobson, who also plays piano for you on the first piece on the CD. And remember, this is volume 2, and we're going to discuss this because I'm looking at. Let me just put it out, and then you can demur. But I have a feeling you're like the world's living authority on Georgia Enescu. Am I close?
Well, you are close because I spent the last 45 years uh, performing his works, researching his manuscripts, publishing unknown works of his 8 volumes, and there is one more to come of previously unknown works which I discovered. And I performed it all over the world, from, of course, the United States till Taiwan, China, Japan. So I spent a great deal of my energy and performing activities, musical activities, studying, performing his music.
And I would like to thank you. I am so glad when I approached you about reviewing this CD. I did so because I and most all of us in the profession know this name, Georgia Enescu. But as I told you before we started taping, I am not quite certain whether maybe I've heard a chamber piece of his or something in the past 50 years, but I had the name in my head, but I had no experience of the music before I began listening, and I believe that's what you're trying to make amends for with this series of recordings. And I want to just point out something else, and then I'll let you get in here. You didn't just research, you dug around and discovered and found and dug up music of Enescu's that had been lost in the back of cupboards and libraries. Am I correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And not only I discovered them, but I rearranged certain things that were left unfinished and filled in the missing parts. I collaborated with some other composers for orchestration aspects, as we'll see on this particular CD.
Yeah.
So it's been a very complex activity uh, related to his works.
Okay, and let's. I'm just going to run down the titles, the works that are on this particular volume 2 of these unknown works of Enescu. We have Impression Romane for solo violin from 1925, arranged by Sherban Lupu. The Sonata Torso from 1911, very interesting piece. Impromptu Concertante in G flat major from 1903. I'm particularly fascinated by this turn of the 20th century. He was, as a composer, he seems to me to have been very much in the 20th century. I mean, those early symphonies of his, by the way, thank you for allowing me to discover 5 of his symphonies. They're magnificent orchestral works, just magnificent. Anyway, in the Sonata Torso, as I mentioned, from 1911, Impromptu Concertante, as I said, in G flat major, very interesting key from 1903. Regrets, 1898, completed by Sherban Lupu. Sonata number 1 in G minor, Dans le style ancien, Opus 3, the Adagio movement from that suite, also from 1897, and again arranged in this case by Sandu Albu. I hope I'm close to pronunciation there. Valse lente, l'enjôleuse, the embellishment from 1902. Very interesting little vignette of a piece. And then this very big Caprice Romane from 1925-49. You explain in your notes that this was put together over several years, so there's quite some disparity, very interesting disparity in the earlier movements from the later movements in terms of his capacity to complete them. And this was also the piece was completed and put together by Cornel Toranush. Am I close?
Serrano.
Thank you,
Serrano.
Toranush. A four-movement piece, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail. Have I done anything wrong yet before I introduce you to the public in
No,
general?
you haven't done anything wrong, but the CD, actually, the first work on the CD is a violin and piano
Yes.
transcription of his famous Rhapsody, which probably is the most known work of George Enescu, Rhapsody for #1 for orchestra. He wrote it when he was 18 years old. And let's not forget that he was not only a prodigy, but a very prolific composer in his youth. And Mahler himself conducted in New York his poem Roumain, the Romanian poem work, and Colon, Edouard Colon in Paris, when he was barely a teenager, actually, conducted works of his. So this Rhapsody, it's a very successful that I put on this CD, arrangement for violin and piano, very virtuosic, keeping all the character and the beautiful aspects of Romanian folk music.
And that's kind of the point of your mission also to and thank you for reminding me. I had the Romanian Rhapsody up there in a little different formatting, so I missed it. And it's very important that the Romanian Rhapsody, from what I read in your extensive program notes, they're fabulous. Is that you put it at the beginning of the CD as an example. Here's what everybody knows. Now, I mean, I'm projecting, you correct me if I'm wrong, but here's what everybody knows, and it's brilliant. By the way, the performance is just amazing. In this case, the Romanian Rhapsody #1 in A major, this Opus 11 #1 from 1901. You have Ian Hobson as your pianist. It's glorious.
Yes, and it was a live performance.
All by
It's a
itself.
live performance
Yeah.
for WFMU radio at the University of Illinois. So it's a live performance.
Wonderful, and the sound in the room is fabulous too for the Romanian Rhapsody. Anyway, you mentioned in your notes that, and it's appropriate, you put this at the beginning of the CD to show us what we remember and know, kind of to get an audience that may be unfamiliar clear about Enescu, and then you present to us these other works that you have found and discovered and rediscovered, and others have arranged and written and completed. So thanks for the correction. The Romanian Rhapsody opens the CD. It's fabulous, and then we get to hear all of this other material, most of which I suppose many of us, certainly me, have not heard in the past, and it's just a wonderful collection. Okay, let's do a little quick bio. Your as I've mentioned earlier, you are really at least one of the living authorities on Enescu's music, and you have just an enormous career. So I'm just going to kind of touch on it a little bit. Studied at the Bucharest Conservatoire with George Malialiu. I hope I'm somehow close. And you left Romania at a certain point to study at the Guildhall School of Music. I'm a Trinity College of Music grad.
Oh, yes.
And I remember these days. I remember the old Guildhall School of Music. You must have studied
Yes, that's
there.
what I studied.
Where you practically approached.
John Carpenter Street.
Yes, where you approached the entry to the school kind of almost down a back alley, as I remember. It was just so strange.
Yes, and it was next to the Blackfriars Bridge.
There you go. Anyway, wonderful days. Yeah, I have wonderful memories of my youth in London as well. You took lessons and studied master classes and stuff with Yehudi Menuhin, with Nathan Milstein and others. Yeah. Prizes.
And also
Thank you.
Ifra Niemann was main teacher at the Guildhall, and the others were master classes, and Menuhin would come once a month to give a master class. And I took advantage of the fact that I was in London and I played for the great people like Milstein, Norbert Breinin from the Amadeus Quartet, asked for advice. London was a fabulous place during the early 70s, I must say, was probably the musical hub of the world at that time. So I tried to take full advantage of it as a young student.
By the way, I was in London at that very time. The very first 3 years of the 70s, I studied with Bernard Keith. Conducting with Bernard Keith, and what I did I mean, Santa Barbara, California is a small town, even if it is close to Los Angeles. I went to an orchestral concert every single evening, Monday through Sunday. Every single evening. I never got to Wigmore Hall because there was always an orchestral concert, and I was studying conducting at the time. But
Yes,
that's,
yes, I would imagine you studying conducting, but I went to so many fabulous concerts,
yeah.
heard all the great artists of that time. I was very fortunate. We were both very fortunate.
Yes, it was a marvelous time, and London is London, the center. Let's see, you have served as a professor of violin at the University of Illinois. Uh,
Yes, after my studies in London, that I was playing in English Chamber Orchestra, London Mozart Players and
oh,
whatever. And
really?
I was having a pretty budding young career for a young violinist with concerts, quite a lot of concerts. Then I went over to the United States, to America, and I studied with Dorothy DeLay one summer. And then I studied at Indiana University with a great teacher, Joseph Gingold,
Ah,
and chamber music with Menachem Presley, uh, whom we all adore and still
mm-hmm.
uh, hear him playing. He's close to 100. So there were amazing people that
Yeah,
I
no,
was
no,
fortunate.
this list of people with whom you've studied is like world class. So you chased the right people. We do that, don't we? As when we're younger, we chase the people with whom we want to study. Um, but your own country, Romania, has honored you, of course, also a lifetime achievement award from the Romanian Cultural Foundation for your promotion of Romanian culture, which is exactly what this CD is doing, and then a title of Commander of the National Order of Merit for your worldwide musical and cultural activities from the President of Romania. So we have before us. You need not worry about your credentials. They're fabulous. And I want to spend now just a little time before we start looking at the music on this CD. I kind of want to. I hope it's not. I hope it's just me that is not totally clear. I just described a few minutes ago about this name hovering in the back of my consciousness, Georgi Enescu. Excuse me, I keep getting the writer mixed up with the composer. I'm sure that's not so unique either. Uh,
Well, it's this Escu. Escu, a
Escu.
lot of. Actually, it's an old Romanian idiom, and it means the son of this
Oh,
Escu.
really? Oh,
That's
thank
why
you.
in Romania you see so many. We had three presidents with Escu at the end,
Oh,
not to
that's it.
mention the Ceausescu and so forth. That it's a old, ancient, archaic form of the son of. Yeah.
Fabulous, just like the Irish, if you will, and
Yes.
other ancient countries that have these sons and daughters of. I'm thinking of Norway or Sweden or something, where the last part of the name identifies just where you stand in whatever the family chronology. This is very interesting. I'm now looking at Georgi Enescu. Again, 1881, 1955, a prodigy beyond all any doubt whatsoever, brilliant, a genius, as you have said. Um,
They called him Little Mozart. Already he was composing in Vienna. He was a brilliant violinist, but he started composing at an early age, and a couple of works on this CD prove it. He was extremely gifted already.
yeah, yeah. And studied with
And
Gabriel Fauré, for example. And I hear
yeah,
Fauré, I hear this French influence, Fauré and
yes, yes, of course,
Andre
of course, Wanda.
Gedalga. I don't know that name.
Gedarge, yes, he was his
Gedalge.
counterpoint teacher.
Aha. And received the first prize in performance at the Paris Conservatoire. Played in the world's most important stages with Alfred Cortot, Jacques Thibault, Pablo Casals. We're talking a world-class career as a violinist, let alone as a composer.
Yes, and not only as a violinist. Besides playing very well the piano, but he was an extraordinary conductor. And I know it from people who played under his baton. Gingold himself as concertmaster of Cleveland, Janos Starker on his principal Chicago.
Give me just a moment. A heavy-duty truck is passing by. Let's
I
go back
can
to
hear
Janos
it.
Starker.
Yes, Janos Starker when he was the principal cellist of the Chicago Symphony. they had unbelievable experiences. Gingold was telling me that he felt more moved and more closer to the musical truth with Enescu than he felt even with Toscanini. He was one of the NBC's concertmasters, so he played many times with Toscanini.
Wow.
And he was at some point considered to become the director of the New York Philharmonic. I found reviews and literature about this. For whatever reason, at that time they chose Arthur Rodzinski, which proved to be a disaster. So anyway, Enescu was a fabulous. Yes, yes. Probably this name means to you being a conductor. Anyway, he played brilliantly the piano, and he was a wonderful pedagogue. He would come and he would go and give master classes. So he was one of the most complete musicians that many people considered him to be of the 20th century.
And I think, and it's not as though he was unknown, but it's just that he has not been elevated to the level that he needs to be, in my opinion, and in most musicians' opinion. And you are doing just that with this CD, and I presume there'll be another, and also with Volume 1. I'll put all of that information and links and everything I can up on the performingartsreview.net website.
Well, I would like to add that Martin Anderson, who is actually the Toccata Classics recording company, is a great fan of Enescu. He, in fact, published, edited the first book in English about George Enescu, written by Noel Malcolm, a good 25 years ago, if not 30 years ago. So he was a meeting of the mind.
I was going to say I had more in mind, something about your co-conspirators, but
yes.
Fair enough. As long as it works, that's the big thing. Let's see, what else do I have here about Enescu? Well, just the idea that, as you mentioned in your program notes, and by the way, they are fabulous. Just what I mean is, just in general, to have program notes that are as extensive as yours for this CD is so helpful in terms of letting all of us in the profession, let alone just listeners, understand a bit more about George Enescu. But you mentioned that he left a legacy of just over 30 published works during his lifetime.
Which is very little.
Yes.
Which is very little compared to his musical output, which
Exactly.
It turns out there were many others. As I found out, he was very demanding of himself and very intolerant. So he felt that some works he didn't feel, it's like painters who think some of the paintings are not good enough, and then you find out they were chef d'oeuvre or they were unbelievable. It's the same with Enescu. He approved only of 33 works, but his output goes to close to almost 100. So that's what I managed to do, to discover these gems.
Yeah,
really.
Exactly, and that's you have also mentioned, and I had no idea except what I hear. By the way, let me just compliment conductors for just a moment, if I may, which is I think we're rather intuitive. We have to be. We have to read the subtexts and the sub-basements. So the idea of, again, big information for me that George Enescu was also a very highly respected conductor speaks volumes, as I mentioned earlier, when I spent most of last night listening to all 5 of the symphonies, to his incredible sense of orchestration, and even in the chamber works, his intuitive understanding of things, let alone his understanding of Romanian culture, in that the folk culture that he works with.
Well, exactly. That's what he did. He took the folk art of the fiddlers, the folk art, and transposed it into settings of unbelievable classical music. By the way, the notes of the program are written by Valentina Sandu Dediu, who is a collaborator of mine, and she's professor at the University of Musicology at the University of Bucharest. So,
well, that expands.
I will pass.
Please do, and that explains a lot about them. I wasn't sure whether you were the author of the notes or not. It didn't recall,
yes,
so thanks.
We collaborated, and she's indeed a very knowledgeable musician. And coming back to Enescu, let's not forget his major work, which is opera Oedipus, which he wrote in 1930, was premiered in 1937 in Paris, which is obviously the name tells you the story, but it's probably one of the most important works of the 20th century for opera.
And presumably not very often mounted or not in Europe
The
anyway.
past 30, 40 years has been, uh, you know, played or performed at Paris Opera, Vienna, uh, Berlin, even in London. I arranged the premiere in the United States in 2005 at the University of Illinois, in the Great Hall. And incidentally, Enescu in the late 40s would come to give master classes, concerts, and conduct the orchestra at the University of Illinois in
I
48,
had no
49.
idea. I had
And I
no
met
idea.
people who remembered him, who they said it was a life changer for them.
Hmm.
How they perceived music and everything after his visit. Uh,
Amazing. And the recordings on this album emphasize, quote, the relevance of the secondary. Now, I don't, that's just such a beautiful quote. It's from the title of Clemenza Fircas, I hope I've got this right, on
yes,
Enescu,
yes.
published in Bucharest in 2005. But this idea, the relevance of the secondary, and what I took from that simple remark is that this is a genius, the relevance of this genius who was somehow stuck in a secondary, if you will, position of recognition and performance. Am I all wet there? Have I gotten in trouble yet on that one, on that remark?
No, no, not at all. But considering the fact that he was contemporary with Bartok, they were born the same year. By the way, they were friends,
Mm-hmm.
and Enescu gave with Bartok the premiere of his second violin sonata. Stravinsky, who was born a year later than Enescu, uh, somehow he was overshadowed by these two larger-than-life characters that were promoted intensely and on good grounds, during the 40s and 50s. While Enescu, let's not forget, he died in 55, and Romania was then a very closed country, communist and sort of isolated. So it was hard to really promote his music. Once the things started changing, then Romania started doing more for him, but didn't have access to all the great concert halls and so forth. So Enescu lived his last years in Paris. He was quite ill in the last couple of years of his life. Uh, so it was a sort of circumstances, political, if you want, the schism between Romania on the East Front, the Russian front, so to call it, and the rest of the civilized musical world. I'm using
Mm.
civilized for the music that was being played. So I think he suffered because his music suffered for a while. But now things are looking much better, and we have a big festival here in Romania, and his works are played all over the world. So,
Yeah.
and I'd like to believe that I'm a small contributor myself in that respect.
Absolutely. And again, about the symphonies, I was amazed they've all been recorded. At least I believe he's written 5 symphonies. That's what I could find,
Yes.
maybe more. But the idea that they have been recorded surprised me. So things are getting better, all right. There are lots of recordings. So it takes us time, doesn't it? It takes society and even professional musicians time to figure out who's who and what's what, and then get busy recognizing. But in this case, Enescu is certainly one of those composers who's growing and growing and growing in stature and performance. And I, again, want to thank you for putting me on to him. That's why I went after you, because I was so curious to see this CD, and then from there to discover the symphonies and so many other works. I don't believe that the opera has been recorded or videotaped. I'm not sure. I wasn't
No, it
looking for
has
it.
been
Oh,
recorded,
it has been.
a couple of recordings. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if they are available easily. We also made a video recording in Illinois,
Mm.
but it has been recorded once in the, I think, late 50s or so here in Romania, and there is another recording. I don't remember the year, but they're not readily available.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me also of when I was a student, I had a thing about the symphonies of Miaskovsky, the Russian composer,
Yes, yes, of
and
course.
it was like pulling teeth to get
Find that.
scores or records or anything because, of course, it was all in the Soviet Union. So there you are. This may sound like a dumb question, and it probably is actually. Come to think of it, I'm looking at it and wondering whether I should ask. But the point is, is Enescu part of Romanian consciousness now? Is it Romanians, of course,
But
know it.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, now it's embedded in our conscience, in our subconscious, if you want. We identify, the Romanian people identify with him and few others, artists, Ionescu that you mentioned, Brancuș, the sculptor, and some um, um, poets and so forth. So, yes, evidently it's part of Romanian being consciousness.
that's why I wanted to ask. Because not to say ignored, but not so well known in the West now. Certainly, at least in your part of the world, very well established as a composer and music performed often. What about, give us the story of, because it was so intriguing, of digging through the archives, the amazing treasures and shocks and joys and thrill of finding these bits and pieces scattered throughout, I presume, several libraries. Give me that story
Well, actually, funnily enough, after I've been for years performing his works, uh, I got the book of Noel Malcolm's, published by Toccata Press, as I mentioned before. And at the end there, I found listed uh, a work for violin and orchestra, Caprice Roumain, Romanian Caprice, which incidentally is on this CD. And I didn't know anything about it. I don't know how Noel Malcolm got some wind of it, but nobody's seen a manuscript or anything. So I became so intrigued that I used my first sabbatical year from the University of Illinois to come to Romania and started searching for this apparent concerto for violin and orchestra in Romanian folk idiom. This was a fabulous proposition for me because you can, like looking for El Dorado, since we don't have such a thing for violin. We have Hungarian concertos of Joachim, we have Bartok concerto, we have Stravinsky with Russian idioms concerto, but we didn't have a Romanian concerto. So then I rallied the composer Cornel Țăranu, one of the most distinguished, not only composers, but Enescu-logs, so to speak. And we started searching at all the libraries and all obscure places, and we were able to come with manuscripts covering, like you mentioned yourself, almost 30 years of work of Enescu, and they were sort of dispersed over the years, a fragment here, a fragment there. So we put it all together, and this is also the great merit of Cornel Țăranu. And he orchestrated parts that were left unfinished. But it was a work that preoccupied, obviously occupied Enescu's mind for 3 decades, or almost 4 decades. And then I took over the violin part, and I embellished it in the parts that were left rather barren, and I used all my knowledge of Enescu's music and the work I've done with Romanian folk fiddlers prior to that. I have some CDs about that. I was very interested in the art of fiddlers, which are fabulous technicians and fabulous musicians. They all play by ear, of course.
Yeah.
And let's not forget that Enescu first started learning music by ear.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Local fiddler in the village.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So that's why he had a fabulous memory, unbelievable memory, because he learned by ear. So anyway, coming back, while doing this work, and little by little it took shape, this wonderful violin concerto in 4 movements, which he himself entitled Romanian Caprice, which he says at some point it's simply a dialogue between a fiddler and his tara, or his little band of gypsy or Romanian folk musicians with cembalom. So the piano has the role of cembalom, much like in the third violin sonata. Then I discovered that as I was looking through all the manuscripts, I became so intrigued that I spent weeks during my sabbatical searching through every paper that was in the archives there and a couple of other libraries. The main one was the George Enescu National Museum. And I started discovering other little works and gems that he either left unfinished or they were on the same paper with some other. He was always made economy of paper for whatever reason, maybe since his student days when he didn't have much money. So you would start to work on one page, and on top of if you turn it backwards, the page, you would have another work.
No, that's amazing.
I remember there were some scribblings which I had to magnify 6 times to be able to. He would hear certain tunes, folk tunes or whatever played, and then he was just jotted down. And I must confess, his writing left a lot to be desired, to be legible.
Thank you. That's why you have the 2 pages of manuscript on the CD, just to show us all how impossible your task was. Yeah.
Exactly. So little by little, other works took shape, and in the first CD, there were quite a few Romanian airs and so forth, which I reconstruct. And this one also has a sort of folk. They have works for solo violin, which is quite unusual. And funnily enough, once the CDs came out, almost bi-monthly, I have requests from all over musicians, violinists from all over the world, from China to Holland to Germany, and they asked me to send them the music, and they loved these pieces, so I did send them whenever they weren't able to.
By the way, so do I, and especially the solo pieces on this CD, and it worked.
Yes.
It worked.
So now they're being played all over the world, funnily enough, by violinists from many countries, and they are fascinated. So I'm very pleased about that, really.
So the Caprice Roman, again, from fragments and bits and pieces over the period of 1925 to 1949, that's a big span of years, seeking out little bits and pieces, completed, as you've mentioned, by Cornel Taran. I hope I got close. And in this case, Ian Hobson conducts the Sinfonia da Camera.
Yes, it's a live performance. Again, it's a
and it is another live performance. You're right.
Great hall at the University of Illinois with Sinfonia da Camera. And it's in 4 movements. The first one is typical of Romanian folk fairy tales or Romanian musical pieces. First is a ballad.
The Ben Moderato, the first movement?
Yeah, the Ben Moderato is a ballad, which, the fiddlers and all folk musicians would think about heroic deeds. The second one is a sort of a hora, which is a round dance. In this case, I think it's after a night of a wedding night or a big party, so everybody's a bit hungover.
That's why it's a bit lopsided.
Yes.
In my stream of consciousness notes, here's what I have. Just so while we're on this piece, the Caprice Roman, the first move, Ben Moderato, this lush, low register kind of tune that opens the movement, and that it has. Here's what I write. It has all kinds of haunting ghosts from Romania's folk history.
Very well.
That's what hit me. So I'm glad you agree that there's something. You know what I mean when something is so atavistic? I think that's the correct word. Atavistic, that it hits the soul right away. You know that it's an idea.
Very well perceived. Very well perceived. So as I said, the second one is a round up, a hora. Third one is a doina, which is a typical Eastern European, Romanian song. It's a sad song from the heart, in which the musician or the storyteller, whatever, sings the most intimate and deep sorrows of his life. So it's actually heart-wrenching.
Yes.
And the last one is really a peasant crazy dance, very virtuosic, and you can see almost the dust rising from the dancer's feet. So this is a concerto, the Caprice Roumain, basically.
And this piece is
And
purely.
it's quite difficult technically. It's very
Is it?
virtuosic.
Is
I
it?
contributed somewhat to that when I reconstructed a lot of the violin parts, but all in the style of folk films.
Exactly, and that is the big piece and the last piece on this volume 2 CD. Thanks very much for all of that. I'm trying to see what I guess in the Ben Moderato I hear this bittersweet kind of tune, and it's nicely to me bittersweet somehow is the word. It's so it's that lush lower thing. Oh, I guess the question I was going to ask is again, hoping I'm not going to get myself in trouble. I'm trying to remember historically whether your part of the world was influenced by the Moorish influence, by those kind of tunes and modalities. Am I anywhere close? This Moorish kind of?
Somewhat,
Somewhat.
somewhat, but not in uh, not a great deal, but
Mm,
somewhat, of course. Music travels beyond borders.
of course.
So maybe the proximity to Turkey, let's not forget that 500 years Turkey was dominating the southern and eastern part of Romania in the Middle Ages. So, of course, that left a print on the musical idiom. Uh, but other than that, it's really sort of local ancient tunes.
And
Uh,
modal, maybe that is what.
Moldau and yeah. Uh, for instance, Bartok used mostly, as he says himself, music from Transylvania, whether it was Romanian or whether it was Hungarian, uh,
Uh,
but he used music from Transylvania. Enescu used music from the southern and Moldavia and Muntenia, the
uh-huh,
southern and eastern part
uh-huh,
mostly.
uh-huh. Thanks. That helps a lot in terms of clarifying it. Now, I'm kind of wanting to go back a little bit to the beginning of the CD. We this Impression Romane for solo violin from 1925,
Yes.
arranged by yourself in
Well,
2008.
I found this manuscript on a paper which had some sort of tunes, obviously written for violin. I mean, it was clearly with glissando signs, and sort of left some ideas on a music paper. Uh, and it was sort of 4 different little ideas, musical ideas, which she didn't proceed to really elaborate. But I thought they were so attractive that I took it upon myself to develop them in 4 movements of solo violin, quite virtuosic, and I think it's quite successful. People appreciate it, as I said. I got requests from other violinists. I think a piece which is very interesting here is uh, this valse lente.
Let me find it.
Lente. The reason being that Enescu, when he was a young man, took it upon himself to want to write lighter pieces, as he put it in a letter to the Salabert editor, lighter pieces under nom de plume, under pseudonym.
Here comes the
Uh,
story.
for some reason, he chose the name Emil Groza. Nobody knows why, but it's in his handwriting. And he asks his editor to allow him to write piece of a sort of, as he call it, light genre. So he writes this with an ironic and comical valse. It's really quite comical. And uh, it's also using some glissandos. There I had no input. I found it edited unknown under the name Emil Groza, but people didn't know that it was George Enescu. Now they know, and if you look in the dictionaries, But anyway,
And he
it's
used
a very funny
he used that pseudonym for that one piece alone. If I got the
one
right.
piece. Probably planned it for more, but
By the way,
because
it's sorry.
by the time he wrote a piece like this, he was quite well known for the Romanian Rhapsodies, for the poem, Romanian poem, for the First Symphony. So he probably didn't want to be associated with what he calls comical light pieces. So
Could it be that petty that he was afraid that a more comical light piece would need a pseudonym? I keep thinking
yeah,
there's something about love or something because it does have to do
yeah,
with seduction.
Angeles means seductress, the seductress. So maybe it was about somebody he knew. Who knows?
That's
As
kind of what
a
I'm
very young.
thinking. Yeah.
But
Uh,
that's what l'Angelaise means, the seductress. And it is very alluring to the entire piece, but in a comical way.
and by the way,
Also,
let me just jump
yeah,
in here. Your playing of this piece, it's absolutely astonishing. Focused, especially with pitch. It's just amazing, and with style, all that style that you've addressed just in the past few minutes. The solo fiddle intro, then the light-hearted waltz. It's oozing in. I use the word Viennese sentimentality, which is
yes,
probably,
it is somewhat Viennese, yes. Very
but
well
but it's
perceived.
fun and wonderful. It would make should make a wonderful encore piece, for example. It's delightful
Exactly.
and stylish in terms of your performance. It's fun. It's just plain fun. Yeah. So yes. Anything else on that piece? Because
Well, there is a piece that I found out that he wrote initially for piano. Then he started to transcribe it for violin and piano, but he left it unfinished, which is regrets. Regrets.
yes, yeah,
It again, well, you can hear Foray, by the way, especially since it's in G flat minor and things
yeah.
like
There you
that.
go.
Let's not forget Son poem is also the same thing,
And this
D flat minor.
and on this
So
recording,
these French people had a penchant for many flats or dark.
don't you now watch it? Be careful here.
Yeah,
Regrets from 1898, completed by yourself
yes,
in
exactly. So he was
2018.
17 years
Uh,
old. And
and you left
I
he
finished
left
reading.
he left one page for you,
Yes, exactly.
if I
One page
understand.
for violin and piano. So I continued the violin part together with the piano part, which was in the piano piece. Um, yeah, that was another thing that I enjoyed doing. The adagio is a heart rendering slow movement of the piano third ancient suite that violinist who lived in the middle of 20th century. I even took lessons with him when I was little. He was
Hmm.
a friend of Enescu, transcribed it beautifully for violin and piano,
Is this
and
Sandu Albu? Sandu
yeah, yeah.
Albu? Yeah.
It's a heartbreaking piece of great lyricism. Uh, the others, of course, the Sonata Torso is just an attempt to write a big sonata. Either he wrote some more and it's lost completely, I couldn't find, but he wrote one movement at the page of the second movement. That's all.
Let me get
Couldn't
down there
find.
to it because I remember being very impressed.
Sonata Torso. It's
Yeah.
called Torso because it's like a sculpture. There are parts missing, so it's just.
Oh, that's very. I remember reading something about how come the title, but yeah, Sonata Torso from 1911. Uh, it's
By
eh,
then he was at maturity, he was 30 years old, so
yeah, and that movement alone
quite a power.
is magnificent, absolutely magnificent. So it's stunning that there might be. This must drive you crazy and sleepless at nights. That there might be the
Well, I'm
other.
going to continue this spring to look in other places that I've been told to look.
Uh-huh.
Some are the library of the Romanian Academy. So hopefully I get lucky. I have another three pieces which I want to publish, and I will. In fact, they are in the works with an editor right now. So the work continues, so to speak.
And that's what keeps us going. The work
Yes,
continues.
exactly.
It absolutely keeps us going. But what I love about this, let me make sure we're speaking of this sonata torso. I'm looking in, again at my sort of stream of consciousness notes. For some reason, I have, again, I spent last night and today listening, but something about loaded with illusion. This movement is every bit as intriguing as Debussy. Am I out of line here? Reminds me, there's this French influence so much in his music.
Well, yes, especially at that age.
Ah,
You can hear
makes sense.
some Romanian idiom in it, but it is almost a French piece. I agree.
I say
Like
wildly romantic and gorgeous storytelling.
the second sonata, which he wrote, well, about, I think he was 19 or 20, second F
Amazing.
minor sonata, it's really a Romanian foray. It's true, but it's you
Ah,
can feel it. But it's the influence of a great master. Uh, uh, well, it's a heavy burden to carry to have a teacher like Foray, as you
yeah,
can imagine. To
absolutely.
find your own language, your own
Uh,
independence is not easy.
yeah, very, very interesting how that works and how studying with someone of Foiret's of distinct compositional style would, of course, especially as you mentioned, a 19, 20-year-old, rub off on a student somewhere, somehow in the mind and stay there. Whatever that French thing, as you mentioned, that G
Good.
minor thing is about Fauré is certainly evident. How about this? Let's see, I'm looking at the impromptu concertant, the G flat major, very interesting key.
Impromptu concertante is one of those pieces that you write for conservatoire as sight reading pieces and so forth at that time. And I think he wrote it for one of these exams, really. But it's a very successful little piece, quite difficult. Again, it's in the key with many flats, which makes it more difficult for the violinist. But I believe it was written for exams at the Paris Conservatoire, sight reading exams or sort of playing a new piece. There was a tradition those days to give sight reading exams and so forth. So I think this is part of a request from the Paris Conservatoire to write this piece.
There are some tricky harmonic and intonation waters. I mean, the piece is very
Yes, yes,
complex.
exactly.
That one movement's very
Yes,
complex. Secondary sweeping theme. He has such a huge. You have such a huge sound here. It's amazing, intoxicating heartthrob of a piece. I write showpiece for the for recital performance. That movement is just a
yes,
showpiece. Gorgeous tunes. That's what really again, my somewhere Enescu was hanging in the back of my consciousness, but I was not associating him with such gorgeous melody. Don't ask me why, because of course I didn't know his music until now, frankly, and the symphonies and so on. But he's such a glorious tunesmith as well. It's a showpiece for recital performance, as I said. Wonderful, magical piece, and again, French salon music, if you will. So uh, Paris went right to his brain, apparently. Um, what have we left out? Let's see here. Well, we talked about
we haven't
regrets.
left out any piece. This covers pretty much, including the Romanian Rhapsody, which I spoke at the beginning.
Yeah,
So, yeah, this is the musical content of the CD.
yeah,
Uh, and, yeah, together with the volume, we have here about uh, 25 pieces, unknown pieces, between the two volumes by Enescu, which now
nice.
circulate all over the world.
Yeah,
So I'm
nice.
pleased.
Well done indeed. You deserve the medal that the president of Romania gave you. Uh, Again, I'm very curious about the first volume now, very curious. So I'll have my own private.
I just like to speak a couple of words about my collaborators.
Sure, please do.
Uh,
Yes.
yes, Ian Hobson is my dear uh, friend of a lifetime. He was my colleague at University of Illinois. He, of course, is the past winner of the Leeds piano competition, Van Cliburn, Rubinstein, and so forth. He had he has quite an extraordinary performing career, but he's also a conductor and a very good one. He has an orchestra at University of Illinois, Sinfonia da Camera. Together over the years, we played over 55 sonatas for piano and violin. We recorded the complete works for violin and piano by Bartok, plus many other works. So he has been my dear and friend and musical partner. Viorela Ciucur, I met her more recently, is a wonderful pianist who is professor at the University of Music in Bucharest. We played quite a few recitals together in the past few years, especially with music by Enescu. So she is also a specialist of Enescu's music.
Good. I think that pretty well covers it. If there's nothing else to discuss just now, I just want to thank you again. Go. Did you have something else you wanted to say?
No, no, I'm thinking that I think we pretty much
I think we've done.
presented the works, Enescu, myself, collaborators, the political and historical atmosphere. I think, yeah, it's been a good interview.
Yes, and you definitely picked up on everything I was trying to get at and plunged right on in and gave me all the answers I needed. So thank you very much indeed. But the real bottom line is that you are. It must be very fulfilling, especially now. And I'm sure you know, we trust there's at least one more volume coming up, perhaps in the
Yes,
next couple 3 years. It's always a horrible
I,
process. By the way, let me just jump in for just a second. I want to ask what kind of a struggle was it for you to decide the order of this second CD? You know what I mean? When there's so much music that you want to, how did you
well, I
make some of
wanted
these?
to start with a piece which is not only very virtuosic, but very well known, like the Rhapsody. Then I felt that if I put the Caprice Romain for violin orchestra anywhere before other works, it would crash. So
Huh?
I'll put it at the end.
Okay.
So in between, I just try to alternate sad with happy or humorous with lyric, just to make a more of a mosaic of a variety.
Yes. Nice intentions. And did it drive you crazy with so much to
Well,
choose from?
It's been a pleasure. All this
A
effort
pleasure.
is worth to see it brought to fruit.
Well, it's getting late in Bucharest. Finally, the sun is coming out here at Santa Barbara. It's been one of those rainy days, which is quite unique. Uh,
uh,
Great fun chatting with you,
I remember
violinist.
the fabulous sunsets in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I will never forget them. Yeah,
Uh-huh. Well, yeah.
San Francisco.
Anyway,
I lived in both.
oh, really? I didn't realize you spent some time in Los
Yes,
Angeles.
San Francisco was concertmaster of the San Francisco Opera, uh, and in
Why
Los
didn't I see
Angeles
that anywhere?
of course, I played with Pavarotti, Domingo, Carrera solos,
Yeah, yeah,
and I learned a great deal.
yeah.
In Los Angeles, I came, funnily enough, that I wanted to meet Heifetz and to play for him, so I went to his house and so forth. I didn't remain there, but it was an experience worth writing in my memoirs sometime.
Yes, absolutely. Well, fabulous conversation. I love the idea that you have had
Likewise, likewise.
such a
It
broad
was quite
experience,
fun.
by the way.
Your questions got me going.
But especially in America, for you to have this experience of Americans, it's we're a strange lot. So I thank you for your patience
Well,
with us.
Dan, I'm as much as an American as you are. That's what
That's
America is. I
yeah.
spent 40 years of my life in America.
And you have American
Uh,
citizenship.
it's my country. I
Yeah.
spent more time in America than I spent in Romania as a matter
Okay,
of my life.
that
So
sounds good.
I'm exactly what America is all about. Immigrant works hard, is given opportunities if you work hard, and eventually good things happen. This is what I consider to be America.
Absolutely a perfect way to end our conversation about one of Romania's great composers, whom you are championing, and your experience in American and North American culture, let alone Europe and the rest of the world. Sherban Lupu, what a pleasure, and I can't wait to get all of this up on performingartsreview.net. Again, we've been discussing your 2022 Toccata Classics release, Georgie. I keep going Georgie, but Georgia Enescu, the Unknown Enescu, Volume 2. Fabulous, fabulous recording.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Dan. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.